Hey guys, what's going on? So today I want to do something a little bit different. I want to go over with you all the settings that I use whenever I film cinematography while I'm vlogging in my favorite of all modes. You guessed it, manual mode. Canon 80D. I mean, it doesn't do 4K. It doesn't have a full frame sensor. I'm here to tell you that I'm happy with the camera. It does a lot of things really great. It fits in this bag. I've got my tripod, I've got 3 lenses up top, and inside of here, I have my camera. When you're vlogging or doing other types of film, you need to be portable. Packs a lot of power. To be honest with you, like I went through the whole 4K thing. I'm fine with 1080p. I do some things in my post-production that makes my footage look a little sharper. You know what, nobody really actually notices. 4K is a deal breaker for you. Don't get the Canon 80D, you know, maybe wait out for the 90D or something like that. Or go with the Canon M50. Let's move right along. I want to show you some of the really cool things about this. I love geeks. Pretty easy to get into my camera bag here. I just zip this open. Right here I have my camera and my microphone, which are already hooked together. So there's a ton of lenses that you can actually get for this camera. It supports both EF, which is this little red dot, and the white dots for EF-S lenses, which is mostly what I have. I mostly have EF-S lenses. EF lenses are full frame. EF-S are for the APS-C style Canon cameras. So this is an EF-S lens. This is actually a 10 to 18 millimeter lens. So this lens allows me to get a very, very wide shot. It doesn't have the largest aperture, meaning it doesn't do great in low light. However, it will keep your image rather sharp, and you'll keep most of your image in focus. So that it's great for vlogging. It has very minimal distortion. It's not going to look fisheye like a GoPro would, for example. You're going to have straight lines, and it's just going to look very, very wide. So if you need to get like a very wide shot, like in a vlogging scenario, then you typically will set it to 10 and then zoom in from there to whatever you need. There is another lens that's, I believe, a 10 to 22 millimeter USM lens. I have no experience with that lens, but that could be another lens that you might be interested in trying. So in addition to that, I opted to go with the Rode VideoMic Pro, and you got to leave this guy turned on. This one's actually battery powered, and one of the things I like about it is the fact that it has this preamp built in. I always keep this on the max, and I turn the volume down in my camera. That seems to be the best for what I need, because when I get in really loud environments, like I was shooting down at the fair the other night, what I did is I just dropped it down to 0, like when I was in those really noisy situations, and that prevented audio clipping. But yeah, typically I keep it on plus 20, and then I turn the volume all the way down in the camera, and I will get to that in a moment. So aside from that, what the camera has to offer is it's pretty lightweight. It has, you know, the microphone in port. It actually has a headphone jack as well. It's got some other out ports like USB and HDMI. It does take SD card, your standard SD card, and you can just pop it right out. I use class 10 32 gigabyte cards. They seem to work pretty good. I'd sort of always have 2 of these, and I rotate them back and forth. I always have an extra one on hand. Same goes with my battery. Like, I get about 1 day's worth out of battery when I'm doing some serious video recording. So the battery comes out like this. I always have a second one on hand ready to go in case I need a battery. So when I first got my Canon 80D, I got one of these, and this is a Joby, and I happen to like this for a period of time. It's actually pretty nice. I mean, you can make it into a tripod, and the camera sits on there. It has this lovely quick disconnect up top, which you just push a button and your camera pops off. There is one thing that I hate about it though, and that's why I chose to upgrade. If you get one of these, you notice how it's bending on that one joint right there? So what happens to these over time is the plastic rings that this joint rotates within will crack. And then there's this little rubber thing that goes around that holds it together. But once those little plastic rings crack, these pop apart like nothing. And it will never stand right. You'll have it sitting on your desk, your camera will fall over, and that scares the crap out of me. Whenever your camera falls over in the middle of a recording, it's not awesome. It kind of sucks. This was about $50 US. Since then, I have upgraded. This is probably one of the more painful things that I have to do every day is get my tripod out. So here's the two of them side by side. So on this side, I have the Joby GorillaPod SLR Zoom, which was my first one, has the cracked rings, drives me insane. And then this one is the more expensive Joby GorillaPod autofocus with ball head X. So this one actually is made out of metal. I've had this for like 3 months now. Don't really have any complaints with this. The only complaint I have with this really is the fact that it's heavier. It will hit you in the funny bone if you carry it around like I do, so you have to like orient this. This is all made of metal. It's definitely a lot heavier than this plastic guy, so if weight's an option, you might want to buy these and just replace them periodically, you know, or maybe you can figure out how to fix them by popping them out. I was just afraid to try to pop them out, and because I think that it's probably just going to break more of the plastic rings. One of the things I do like better about this was the fact that this has a really quick disconnect, where this one's a little bit more difficult to connect. It just goes in right here, and then it slides over like that, and then you tighten this down. So if this comes undone a little bit, it slides, and then it still can't get out of there. I'm having so much fun, guys. Okay, so let's dive into the real meat and potatoes. Okay, so when you get your camera, it's probably going to be set into auto. There's only one mode that I ever use with a DSLR camera, and that is this letter M. That's our manual mode. I don't mess around with any of those other modes. I will tell you that as far as video concerned, manual is going to give you the most control. Some of these other things like aperture priority and stuff, program priority, there's a lot to be desired in those modes. And there are some things in manual that you can flip to automatic, which will help you out tremendously. So to turn your camera on, this is the on switch. And then right here you will notice that there's a camera. This is for taking pictures, and this is for shooting movies. So I flip this to movie mode, and you'll see that it's bringing up a live view. We'll time out after about a minute. You can bring this up by hitting the start stop. Start stop also starts your movie recording. This is your histogram, which shows you how your image is exposed. This can be, you can cycle through by pressing this info button, these different views, to see more detail here on the screen. I tend to like all of it turned on. That's just the way I roll. You will see there's a Q button here. There's also one on screen. So that button is sort of like your quick access to settings. So if you select the menu button, this will bring up some options. On screen 4, you will see right here, this is one of the options I want to show you through the menu. If we select movie record quality, you'll see there's MP4 and MOV. These are two modes. You have to go into the menu to switch this. If you shoot an MOV, you end up with only the ability to shoot at 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second. This is an important thing to note. This will give you a little bit better picture. It's a little bit better codec. While you're recording, you end up with bigger files with larger bit rates. I will tell you that I rarely ever use this movie mode because I like to switch frame rates a lot, and I like to film some stuff at 60 frames per second. So I don't like to have to go all the way into this menu setting to do that. So what I do is I keep this on MP4, which allows me much more flexibility with my frame rates. At first, I was coming in and out of here all the time and switching it, and then I was missing the moments because of all that nonsense. So once you get that selected to MP4, or if you want to shoot an MOV, that's fine. I'm just kind of giving you a little bit of advice here on how to speed this whole process up. There's really not much else I want to show you in the menu right now. Everything else that I'm going to show you is through the Q button. So when you press the Q button, it's also available on screen, if the screen's already up. It will bring up a lot of shortcuts and things that you can select. So the first thing I will show you is the focus menu. So this first area right here, this is face detection. It also gives you the ability to do motion tracking. So you can select an area and it will record as you move the camera. It will stay on that area. And this is one of the greatest things about Canon's dual pixel autofocus, is it will stay focused on that. Again, you press Q and you can switch to this mode. This is a single point focus mode. And what I will tell you about this mode is that it's got a really neat leveling system where it will tell you if your camera's level. Sometimes that's important. As well as it allows you to move the focus point. So if you're filming like some slow motion B-roll and you want something to stay focused in the middle of the screen, I prefer to use this because it just keeps whatever's in the middle of the screen focused. It doesn't track anything. It gives me more control. So those are the two modes that I primarily use the most. So I'm going to switch us back to, you actually get really quick at this once you do it more. I'm going to switch back to the face tracking mode, and then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to show you again how you can switch frame rates. So my favorite frame rate is the 23.98 full HD recording as used in cinematography. So all your movies are recorded in 24p. 30p will look a little smoother, but I prefer the 24p. If you want to film anything in slow motion on this camera, as you select this full HD at 60 frames per second or 59.94 frames per second. So what I primarily use this for is like B-roll stuff or super fast things that I want to slow down or potentially want to slow down later. It will take and make a slightly larger file, but you can slow it down. So one important aspect of cinematography is that whenever you have selected your frame rate, that again, that's the first thing I do. I either select 24 or 60. 60 is for slow motion, mostly, is doubling this to get your shutter speed. So at 24, I'm going to want to select 50 for my shutter. Now if I select 60 frames per second, that's 60 pictures per second, I take this up to 120. However, there is no 120, so I go with 125. The very next thing I do in camera is I select my aperture. So if I'm shooting, typically I'm shooting wide open unless it's really super sunny out. This particular lens doesn't have a great aperture. However, there are instances where it's too sunny outside, and I will stop this down to like 8 or 11 or whatever it needs to be to reduce the amount of light coming in the camera. And again, you know, the faster frame rates are going to reduce the light coming in the camera anyway. So it really just depends on your light, and you can use this info button to bring up your histogram. Again, this histogram only works before you hit record, so keep that in mind as well. However, you can normally visually tell by just looking at the screen whether the shot's exposed. It does okay in sunlight. So the light today is pretty forgiving. I think I can go all the way up to the 5.6. This lens isn't actually zoomed all the way out. I think I can actually get a little bit more. Yeah, I can go all the way to 4.5. Again, this lens doesn't have a terrifically large aperture, but it's great for vlogging. One of the things that I really like about so the third thing that I set up is my ISO. And a lot of times I will record in auto, especially if I have little kids and a lot of stuff going on. I'll just leave it in auto. However, that will cause your exposure to drift a little bit. It really depends what you're shooting and whether you care about that or not. Like if you're walking in and out of doors, having that ISO set to auto will handle that for you. However, you have to have these in range. You know, you don't want to go from like a super dark to a super bright environment with. Let's go back to 24p, and then we'll set our frame rate back to 50. And you get so fast at this, the more you do it, it's crazy. My ISO's in auto. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hold down the shutter button on the front of the camera. This is one trick that I've learned. So I just hold this down, and you will see on the back that it now says ISO 400. So it actually will tell me what the camera needs the ISO to be. And this is something, you know, until you get like a lot of experience with your lens or your camera, you may use that as sort of a hack. So now say I want to keep this at ISO 400. I don't want it drifting around on me. I can just pull it to 400 and lock it in. So now we are shooting at 1/50th of a second on a 4.5 aperture with an ISO of 400. And no matter what I do with the camera, it's going to stay, and it's not going to move the exposure triangle on me at all, which I like. So that's important. Sometimes it really depends. You know, you can still put it on auto if you want a little bit of help from your camera. Probably one of the most important things is how do you record. So some of these settings you'll see here before you hit record. Basically to record, you just hit this start button up here. So right now we are actually recording, and I want to tell you that you can actually change settings while you're recording. For example, you can change your shutter, aperture, and your ISO. One of the annoying things at me at first was the fact that whenever I rolled this slider up here, it would actually change my shutter. And then I found that when I was shooting photography, I could hold this set button in and rotate this dial at the top, and it would change my ISO. That, for whatever reason, on the Canon 80D, even with all the firmware updates, doesn't do anything other than adjust the shutter. Drives me crazy. So if you want to adjust ISO while filming manually, you actually have to hit ISO and then dial up top. So you can actually dial these in while you're filming as well. So like if you're going to go from some bright environment, you can kind of add a little bit of stylistic thing. I did this the other day with a sunset. I basically stopped down my ISO, and it sort of gave different exposures of the sunset, and I thought it looked really cool whenever I was editing the video at the end. So the same thing goes to stop the camera. You hit stop just like that, and there you have your clip. Now if you want to review your clips, you just hit this play button, and it allows you to go back through your clips, and you can go one by one. You can also hit this little info button here, and it will tell you some information about how things were set up for that particular thing. And I'm not sure if you play this, if these will change or not, but shooting in manual is really not that hard. Again, this Q button's mainly what I go through. Some other things you might be interested in, I mentioned earlier about the microphone. You can control your microphone here. It has this little thing where you can turn it up really loud. I tend with my VideoMic Pro, doing all the amplification, is I drag this all the way down and I just go bump bump twice, and that seems to give me some pretty decent audio. You might even be able to get away with 3. However, if you turn this up too loud, it's going to be, your audio is going to be way blowed out. You want to stay out of the red. This will also show up while you're recording. Get back out of here. You can see this little thing right here. I think that even shows up while you're recording if you have the info button selected at the right stage. So like if I talk really loud or snap my fingers, I can probably get some clipping there, and that just kind of gives you a visual indication of what's going on. Okay, are there any other settings? Your headphone volume. This is something that you can't do on the 6D Mark II. I do use that a little bit. I've found that it doesn't work great for like listening to yourself. It's not loud enough for whatever reason. Oh, and back on the microphone, if you do not have a mic hooked up and you're using the 2 stereo mics that are built into the front of the camera, there's actually a microphone here and one on this side as well. One of the things that I discovered one day when I didn't have my Rode VideoMic Pro hooked up is that I was actually able to record in stereo, and I thought that was kind of neat. And it really, the onboard audio isn't terrible. It doesn't limit the background noise. One nice thing about the VideoMic Pro is that it will actually, it's a shotgun mic, so it mostly just records what's behind and in front of the camera, and that can be helpful. I had a ceiling fan that was humming, and it didn't even show up at all in my post-production. So a little bit on the articulating screen, you can pull it out like this, and I've actually used it to film like people in the back of a car, just like so. It will come completely all the way around, which is really cool. It also will flip this way, as well as give you the ability to tilt this if you're like looking from above. There is the GH5, which has a lot of this camera's features. The only thing is its focus system is just not on par with what the Canon 80D focus system. It uses contrast-based focus, where this camera uses the dual pixel autofocus. Dual pixel autofocus is more superior. It's like having a second person helping you focus. I love it for that. I already got my assistant, and let's go film. Okay, so if I want to film myself, after I get this out of my bag, the first thing I do, I sort of set up in tripod mode right now, is I take these and I just kind of wrap them towards me. Super simple. And then of course you just flip the screen around and you're sort of set up for vlog style. So over time you will learn how to feel these buttons without actually looking at them, but you can cheat for now. You can see that I'm shooting at 1/50th with auto ISO, which is totally cool for right now. Now I'm recording. So here you can see, again, I'm 1/50th. If I want, I can change my ISO to manual and it stop up or down that ISO. So it's really that easy. And then you just walk around and you talk to camera, looking into the camera lens, and voila, that's it. So what if I want to shoot some B-roll? So typically when I shoot B-roll, I like to shoot at a higher frame rate, like 60 frames per second, and then I slow that down in my editing software down to 40%. Okay, so it's actually getting a little bit dark on me, and that wide-angle lens only has a 4.5 aperture, so it doesn't do great in really dark light, especially at a high frame rate like I'm wanting to record at. So what I have is I have this pancake lens. It's a 24mm pancake lens, and it has an aperture of 2.8. Okay, so now that I want to shoot B-roll, what I'll do is I'll select Q. I'll go here and switch this to 60 frames per second. And I'll come back here. I'm going to change my shutter speed to 125. My aperture is wide open. This lens has a 2.8 aperture. Then I'm going to depress my shutter button, and you're going to see it says 640. So I can actually choose that if I want, or I could have selected it manually. So 640 is okay. Most of the light's here in the mids. So now I'm ready to shoot B-roll. So now the idea to shooting B-roll with this Joby is to have one hand down here and the other hand here. You hit start with your thumb and you just kind of keep your arms straight, and you can move left to right, you can move up to down, you can move in all these different directions, and because you're making this square with your arms, you tend to get a very much smoother shot. So I'm going to go B-roll these plants over here. One thing I forgot to mention is that when I'm doing B-roll, I like to switch to this focus mode, the single point focus. Alright guys, I've got a lot of footage to edit, so I better get to it. But if you're interested in buying either a Canon 80D, a Joby, VideoMic Pro, or any of the other products that I've shown in this video, be sure to check out the product links in the description of this video. If you click on those and buy the product, I'll make a few pennies. It really does help. I appreciate each and every one of you. And also, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.